Con, because we're going to be spending a couple of days working on that at Gen Con. And then I can go in and start working on the myth cycles and the rest of the book. But the goal is to then get that out so that you'll have the complete encyclopedia of every place in Glorantha, the major figures in Glorantha and so forth, and a complete encyclopedia of the gods and mythology of Glorantha, all in one place. And at that point, Q&A should become, either it's going to be really boring, because the answer will be, well, let's just look at page 566 in volume 2 of the guide, or it becomes more interesting as we play around with some of the themes that have been put into that. But anyways, that's not really a Q&A about Glorantha, but that's where we are right now. And with that, I think I just want to jump open and see if anybody has any questions. Yeah, there you are.
I've been waiting to ask this for a long time, because I did ask online about the renativity of the goddess.
Yes.
And my question was, in some of the earliest material, it seems to me that the goddess is reborn, as opposed to the apotheosis of the goddess, which in Lives of Sardinia happens a little bit later. But she's reborn at Terang in 1220 after the 7 mothers perform the rite. And in the early material, it seems to be she who waits, who is seen as being the vehicle for that rebirth. In later material, Tilo Nori appears to be, it's her body and consciousness which is usurped by the goddess.
Yep.
The goddess
And there's even a third one.
There's a third option in the Pavis book where she comes back as a baby.
Yep.
And we have a nativity. Now, I know that there's cultural relativism, and I know sources reflect the view of the people who... But I was just trying to wonder if there was any hardcore belief. Does it vary amongst 7 mothers' churches? Is it just that we're looking at different cults' takes on it?
You're looking at different... Okay, the core bits about it is that no one, even within the lunar way,
Right.
who is not illuminated, is told what the role of she who waits is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's problem number one for any, and there aren't exactly a whole lot of illuminated lunars in Pavis. So the description that was given in Pavis what is the most commonly accepted version of the story in the lunar provinces. So, and in that, the way that they chose to explain the story is, well, she's clearly reborn. She's reborn as a baby. Tilo Nori conveniently doesn't seem to appear in any stories after that. And She Who Waits doesn't appear in any stories after that. But we're going to describe it in that there's now this baby, and she grows up in shocking quickness.
Does She Who Waits really appear in stories before that either?
There's always just a reference to She Who Waits.
Is also appearing in this myth.
She who is also appearing in this myth.
Is appearing in this
and I believe in the, if you all don't mind, let's see what the draft says.
What?
Of the Prosopadia.
Oh, right.
Because She Who Waits does have a short Prosopadia outline, and I believe it's suitably frustrating for those who are seeking certainty with a pertaining to a goddess of occult mysticism, turning cyclical nature and illusion. She Who Waits is a mysterious, this is the official lunar position. She is a mysterious person, spirit or deity, whose unfathomable secrets and powers are known only to the illuminated initiates of the Red Goddess. She is, however, associated with the Black Moon. She Who Waits is never depicted in lunar art. All right, so from that you can pick out a few things, which is whatever it is about She Who Waits is an illuminate secret, and is probably do you need to be illuminated to actually understand what She Who Waits is and to get any sort of a consistent
Did we
story
say
from
that
it.
she was actually an illumination cult? She is the Black Moon.
She Who Waits is often described as the illumination cult. We also know that there are several other names for this illumination cult.
Illumination school.
Or illumination school. There is also an illumination school of Rosh Hashanah. There is also an illumination school, schools associated with Nizelor. There are illumination schools associated with the Great Sister. So, without fear of contradiction, and almost everything involved in the direct origins of the goddess is probably by necessity having an element of self-contradiction. I mean, this is not only the cyclical goddess, but this is the goddess who does incorporate chaos into the middle world, and is a goddess very fond of Zen koans. With all that being said, it's pretty clear that she who waits is some sort of harbinger of the illuminated nature of the Red Goddess. And that there may not be any actual individual she who waits. It's most likely just a power or something called upon by the Seven Mothers, possibly originally not even knowing what it was that they were calling upon. And that's a tremendous other element to the Seven Mothers ritual, is the Seven Mothers, this was not the result that they expected.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
They did not, they got what they wanted, but this is not what they expected.
So what did they expect, or did we not know?
They didn't know. The Seven Mothers were engaging deliberately in insane experimental hero questing to try to gather something that could.
They were desperate.
They were desperate. They were being ground under the ground under the hoof by the Bolshahs. All of these were, I mean, the Carmanian, and it's also important to remember how brutal the Bolshah Carmanian Empire was. You know, what's a little bit about the Bolshah who takes Rabanth and forces all of the elders to fornicate with each other for his amusement. I mean, these are guys that would make Ashurbanipal or Nebuchadnezzar look like, you know, friendly, happy liberators. The Bolshahs were nasty, nasty folk, and the Seven Mothers were desperate and needed something to be able to stop the Carmanians. And so they went on a desperate experimental hero quest. They combined people that came from very different religious traditions and with very different motivations. And what they came back with was the reborn moon goddess that was destroyed in the God War. And even she didn't know that was what she was. The Red Goddess herself had to have an element, had to have her goddess quest to really realize what she was. I mean, powerful demigoddess, the loyalty of the young elementals, able to do all sorts of remarkable...
That's why I said before the apotheosis, the renativity and Captain was two very separate things.
Yes.
The apotheosis is
yes.
some years later.
And yes, and with her goddess quest, then what comes out is the final complete and fully illuminated Red Goddess. But yeah, I mean, this is one where we had to throw. Greg has written many versions of the stories, and at first I thought that this was a case where Greg was writing a story and then saying, no, that's not right. This is the right version of the story. Nah, that's not right. This is the right version. And I was asking Greg about this a few years back. He says, no, these are all valid lunar stories that are likely all known within the Lunar Empire. And that another thing about this is we shouldn't expect tremendous degree of doctrinal uniformity about what the Seven Mothers did. It's been about 400 years. The other bit is the Lunar Empire was effectively destroyed in the third and fourth wane. Yep. And a tremendous amount of certainty about what the Seven Mothers were was lost, except to various people who were able to come back and say, well, I know, I can prove it's this. and I could prove that it's this. And it didn't always match up because that's the nature of mythic or religious experience. Is it's not always consistent. Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And I'm glad this morning in the game, nobody played She Who Waits. So all players spoke to her and interacted with her as if she was there, and it was a way you could deliver monologues about what your character was feeling and reflect yourself. So you talked to She Who Waits, but only when you were introduced to She Who Waits, then she was as real to you as any other character, but there was no She Who Waits player.
That is perfect.
And that's how we did it.
That's absolutely spot on perfect. That is far, far better than having there be a player, and that's clearly that you're on the sign to elimination. Clearly on the sign to elimination.
I'm just moving away from the beard of the lamp over there.
It's okay, they won't know.
Hey, CJ, they won't know.
They won't know.
Oh, it's just true.
That's the whole point.
They don't know.
So are the different understandings the sort of thing they argue about in the Agora and the Lunar Empire, or are they more sort of like the outer mysteries of the different lunar cults?
Both.
Okay.
Both. But remember, as long as the mediator between all of this is the Red Emperor, and as long as it doesn't threaten the Emperor,
As long as he doesn't say anathema, you get to be driven out of town in a
which again gets to what extent does this does a current incarnation of the Emperor know it? He wasn't there. The Red Emperor was not there during the birth of the Red Goddess.
To be fair, factual uncertainty has never actually prevented dogmatic absolutism before. So those two things aren't totally correlated.
No, but the within the history of within the history of the lunar religion itself, the major times that there's been a crackdown, one was against Greya. No, not Greya. Stick Lady. Adi. Valari Adi. In Valari Adi, there was Valari Adi was teaching that the Red Goddess was Dendara.
Yeah.
And there were a number of problems with that. One is that it potentially would weaken and damage the Red Goddess herself by misidentifying her with something that the Red Goddess was most emphatic that she was not. And that had to be stopped. She wasn't murdered or killed or whatnot. She just basically got to confront the Red Goddess, thought this was a test.
Sent to re-education camp.
Not even sent to that, just stripped. And realized that she was wrong and was so dejected and horrified upon realizing that what she had built her entire understanding about the world about was a lie, that she went into a deep funk, got super depressed, and ultimately more or less tried to commit suicide as part of the Gera cult, and then had her moment of illumination and spiritual truth.
Many years ago, a friend of mine had a green book called the Entiscodiad.
The Enticosiad is a glorious and wonderful book, and I cannot wait to have it back out in print.
I haven't got a copy of it because you can't get it.
You'll be able to get it pretty soon.
Good. In that, I seem to remember there was she also identified Dendara with Entikos, the Palladian.
Now, that is true.
Now, is Entikos the same as the Red Goddess?
No.
Right, so then she's not either Dendara or Entikos, but
Correct.
Entikos is
Absolutely
Dendara.
correct.
Okay, right. That was what I was trying to get my head around.
To the extent, now, it does get really confused. Just to throw, I gave you a very emphatic statement, but anytime I make an emphatic statement about the Red Goddess, I've got to qualify it to some extent. She's a really slippery, tricky goddess of glamour and illusion. The Armali say, well, the Armali, who know a fair amount about the moon in the god time, moons, and know more about some of this stuff than the lunar stuff. They just they don't understand the Armali are all dead and broken, but they have a story that there was what those wacky Dara Happens call the planet Entikos. When it became black in the god time after I can't remember what the name of her consort is in the myth, but it became black as her consort died and she became the widow planet, she gave birth to several daughters, and one of those daughters was the blue moon. And there is a weird relationship between the blue moon and the red moon goddess. And so it's possible that there is some sort of weird backhanded ability to make a connection. But the red goddess herself was very emphatic that she was not Dendara and not Antikos.
Which blue moon? It's not the Scylla, that's the second blue moon, isn't it? It's the one which is sapphire blue, is that right?
Well, now, okay, the Dara happens, and the Pelorians have a tradition of there being a successive variety of moon goddesses, each with different names and different associations, starting with Varatharusa, and working its full way through the cycle with, and that's recorded by the Lunars and is recorded in some of the old Darahapan Skygazer material. The Art Mali tradition, which may be terribly misunderstood by the Veldang and terribly misunderstood by the Fonridians, who are the heirs of elements of that tradition, don't entirely agree with that version of the tale. They don't entirely agree with it. And part of that is that there is a degree of confusion and inconsistency on something that was broken. And the one thing everybody agrees on is that there was a moon goddess or moon goddesses. She was broken and destroyed in the Gods' War. And originally the Art Mali and the Veldang, and most folks said, and the only part that survived is the blue streak that goes up and down through Magestus Pool. But the Red Goddess reassembled many of those pieces and incarnates them and ascended as the Red Moon, which is the heir to this. But there's always, with the Lunars, there's a lot that's right about it, but there's always a little bit about it that's probably not entirely, shouldn't be entirely taken at face value. Because she also threw a little chaos into the mix there, which the moon goddesses previously had no connection to. Maybe I'm making this now as clear as mud. Anything else, anybody?
Were you suggesting there was another major crackdown you knew of?
Yes. Okay, during the reign of Shang Solaris, there was a Nizalorian order that showed up, and Shang Solaris said, you've got, you must end. We won't tolerate you. And it turned out that they were just that he didn't have the ability to break them. They threatened, one version of the story is they threatened to reveal a weakness that he had. Another was it just simply wasn't possible to break them. Another was that they showed to him that they will always exist, so why bother? But nonetheless, he sanctioned one of the pre-existing lunar orders of illumination. And when Shang was defeated, they continued to be the main illumination sect until they got cranky. I believe it was about Haniel, and complained to the Red Emperor. And rather than grant their request, which is what they expected, he ordered the complete destruction of the entire sect and every member of it. But that's not, the normal sort of crackdown on heresy or differing interpretation. I mean,
he orders them dissolved.
He orders them dissolved, kills members that don't conform.
And don't join this new approved version.
Did you look it up in Fortunate Succession or in the guide? It's in both of them.
Yeah, I'll go to the guide in just a second.
It's in the Illumination chapter. So, by the way, for me,
the Order of Carestus. No,
the Order of Carestus, right?
Yeah, it was an avatar of Nisalor. A native response to the Shang Solaris methods. His struggle to survive was epic, but he was unbeatable, and eventually Shang Solaris made his the only approved method of illumination. Many years later, the Imperial Adept of Carestus complained the Emperor of the Order of Day was interfering with his ancient rights. The Lunar Empire immediately disbanded the organization and made membership a capital crime.
Yeah, there we are. Yes?
Quick question on illumination as we're talking about it. If you're reading the modern transpersonal people like Wilbur, Cora, etc., they spend a lot of their time arguing about whether there's one state of illumination or multiple. In Gloranthan, is illumination a state, or is it a process? So is it a state one reaches, or is it a process or a function of a person's consciousness? And secondly, is the one form of illumination or multiple? I know there's multiple paths to illumination, but is the end result the same, or are there separate types of illumination?
Okay, I'm going to give you an first annoying response, which is, who are you asking?
Okay, well, ask the Lunars.
Okay, you ask the lunar, and the reason I have to say that is it does actually get really tricky about that.
Okay.
The Lunars say that there is illumination is the end result of having your seventh soul fully awakened, and you've achieved that moment of liberation,
Okay.
and so it's a state. Once you've been illuminated, you are illuminated. What has been seen cannot be unseen. What has been learned cannot be unlearned.
So everybody's state of ego death, or whatever that state of comprehension is identical at that point.
To the extent that we give it on one way of looking, yes. Another way of looking at it is there are those that that possess the will, the training, the discipline, the mental faculties to be able to experience this state and not go bug crazy. And then there's the poor folk that have not been illuminated through the proper approved paths of the Lunar Empire that are sanctioned, like the Order of the Day and so forth. You follow their path, you're probably going to be safe.
To follow up on that, the important bit in the next paragraph is the Order of Day included service of consciousness of the ascetic movement. They used many stories and practices of the Dolathi, an order of good mystics who had been hidden among the former members of the Order of Carestus. So he doesn't say you guys are all wrong, he says, no, some of you are right. And the rest of you are all dead. But the only...
But you guys,
you
guys are right. Rest of you off to the execution chambers. But yeah, but the point is that the Lunars would say that if you follow the Order of the Day, you follow one of the accepted lunar paths, you could become, when you have the moment of illumination, you will be prepared for it. But if you don't, if you become illuminated in some other path, it's going to go horribly wrong. And we all know what that means.
It actually says in is it Pavis that if you don't have the support of a new god, you go mad. Basically, that's the whole point. You need the support. You actually need the support of a new god, so that when you're exposed to the all, you can withstand it.
And that is, if you ask the Lunars, is precisely what they would say. Now, if you ask somebody else, they may give you a very different answer.
So which comes, I think, a really interesting question is how, like, people that claim that, like, draconic illumination, what do the Lunars even say about them?
It's not illumination.
Right.
That's what the Lunars say about it. It's not an Isolarian.
Yep.
It gets more complicated when you bring up Arcat or Argrath or any of the other major clearly illuminated figures of Gloranthan herodom.
So the Lunars would say that not all mystical experience having force is illumination, but there's more illumination than they officially teach. But within that is with marginally lower rates of becoming evil and or crazy.
This is a good point. I just want to draw a pretty Venn diagram. Yes. Because everybody who knows me knows that at some point I have to go up and draw something. So this circle represents all of the possible ways of achieving that mystical transcendence, that unity with the all, that unity with the void, that ego death, whatever it is. We'll just call all of that. And of that, That's Nisalorian illumination. And of that, the Lunars say, and these are the safe ways of achieving
Right.
Nisalorian illumination. Now, they recognize and tolerate the existence of these others. But then when you do really dumb, crazy things that threaten the safety of the Empire, they don't smile on you
But
very...
you said that was monism. That's the universal. All is one and one is all. I am here as you are, me as we are here as we're all together.
Goo 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 joob.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, years ago, I did my undergrad this on my first research was Timothy Leary around the introduction, where it was psychedelic drugs and mysticism and personal states of consciousness. And in those days, it's like a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, there was the monistic. Yeah. I don't even do drugs, you know. I'm a boring Christian, but you know. The monistic experience was seen as being one of two types of mystical experience, but happened in others. And I'm thinking Greg would have lived through this whole
Oh yes, absolutely.
and he would have been shaped by all this.
And so much, and this is another thing, if you want to have an out of Glorantha cheat guide, a lot of the times too, and this is something we were talking about last night, a lot cheat guides to a lot of the themes and core assumptions in Gloranthan mythology do look at the sort of stuff that was running through the counterculture in the Bay Area in the late 1960s, 1970s, early 1980s.
Machine elves,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But also you've got encounter mysticism, the Semitic tradition, where people like Teresa of Avila and stuff like that. Is there an equivalent to that in Glorantha, or is it just theism?
Well, okay. Part of the issue here is a lot of the things that we in the real world label as illumination would not necessarily get labeled as illumination in Glorantha. So there is the ability through shamanic practices to have to have that moment of unity with the all. But no one in Glorantha, I think, would call that illumination.
But what about mystical illumination, which does not seem to be unity with the all? That's what I'm saying. What about that, where Tim Leary went through the experience? He talked about ego death, but also ego inflation, where you confuse yourself with the all and come out of it as separating yourself from the all and seeing. So you actually have...
Yeah, and I actually think that things like that appear in a number of initiation practices within parts of Glorantha, but wouldn't be described as illumination. For example, very easily could look at the Malchione experience of joy as a form of illumination. It is a moment of oneness with the one. But it's not illumination.
The Yalmalio towers, where the priests sit and stare at
the whole Dezitar
Yeah.
tradition of focusing yourself on something that is outside of the cosmos. Because remember, Dezitar has removed himself not only from the earth, not only from the sky, but you know, in the images, if you look on the image of the cover, he's actually standing outside and protruding outside of the cosmos itself. It's because he is that transcendence through perfect purity. He's so removed from, he's managed to remove himself and achieved ego death through transcending the cosmos. But you would not call that, a Nisalorian would say, well, but that's not illumination.
We also have the problem in that we're trying to apply real-world terminology to a fantasy world.
And this is a huge problem.
And
This is absolutely a huge problem because one is, we all speak English, or most of us speak English as our native language. We come intellectually from a tradition where many of these words come from either Greek or Latin. None of these words really track nicely to the magic of a fantasy world.
Yeah,
In fact, many of these words don't even track nicely within our own language, which is a lot of the problem in any sort.
In mysticism studies, we tend to use Sanskrit terms.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sanskrit's a much more...
Sanskrit is a language that, but unfortunately, I do not have enough knowledge in Sanskrit to be able to use Sanskrit terminology for Glorantha, and I also know that my audience would probably not be willing to purchase books where they're looking at these words and going, what the heck does that mean? And this is also, Greg went through this period of coming up